Ever get the feeling like you're kind of wrestling with yourself, like something's holding you back, even when you really want to change?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there. It's more common than you think. It's like an invisible resistance, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so frustrating, right? You want to move forward, but it's like something's stopping you.
And willpower alone doesn't always cut it.
So what is it then? What's going on there?
Well, what if I told you this resistance could actually be coming from your past, like an echo or a pattern? We could call it your old frequency.
Okay, old frequency, I like that. But how can something from the past actually be affecting us now?
Think of it like this. Every thought, every emotion you've ever experienced, every frustrating situation, it all contributes to creating a sort of blueprint, like a blueprint for how you react to the world, you know?
Yeah, okay, so like a set of default reactions.
Exactly. A set of deeply ingrained habits, beliefs, even fears, almost like a default setting that you keep going back to.
So even if I consciously want to change, this old frequency is running in the background, like maybe even sabotaging my efforts.
You got it. Let's say, for example, you've always struggled with money. Maybe you grew up without a lot or had a major financial setback. That experience, it becomes part of your frequency, making you hypersensitive to anything related to money, even small things.
Oh, wow, yeah, that makes sense. I know just a slightly bigger bill that I was expecting can really throw me off.
Exactly. And logically, you might know it's manageable.
Right.
But it's not just about the present situation. It's about how that old frequency, your past, is primed to react.
It wants to keep us in that familiar territory, even if it's not a good place to be.
Exactly. Even if it means staying stuck in stress and worry.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. But if we're talking about like rewiring those deep-seated patterns, where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is recognizing that you're not alone in this, right? And then it's understanding how this old frequency operates. It's like a worthy opponent in a game of strategy. And one of its biggest weapons, believe it or not, is attention seeking.
So it's like it wants to be the center of attention all the time.
You could say that. Think of it like that friend who thrives on drama.
Oh, yeah. Always needs to be in the middle of it all.
Exactly. They always need to be noticed. And it's the same with the old frequency. It wants to be noticed too. When do you think it flares up the most?
Let me think. I guess probably when I'm already feeling negative, like angry, frustrated, stressed.
Exactly. It feeds off those negative emotions. The more you dwell in those negative emotions, the stronger it gets.
So it's like a vicious cycle. We feel bad, it gets stronger, and then it throws more bad stuff our way.
Precisely. And it's sneaky about it too. It throws those situations your way, hoping you'll react, you'll bite.
Oh, man. So things like getting that unexpected bill, having a horrible commute, someone saying something that just triggers you.
It's all fuel for the old frequency.
This is kind of creepy, but also fascinating. It's like there's this hidden mechanism that's been running our lives without us realizing it.
Exactly. And by understanding this mechanism, that's how we start to take back control.
So how do we do that? How do we start to recognize when that old frequency is trying to get our attention?
Well, we'll dive more into that in the next segment.
Okay, good. I'm ready for that. So attention seeking, that's one of its tactics. What else should we be looking out for?
Okay, this one might sound a little unsettling. The old frequency can also be, well, kind of sadistic.
Wait, sadistic? You mean it like enjoys our suffering? Like it wants to make us miserable?
It's not that straightforward. Remember, it's not a conscious entity. It's a pattern.
Right.
A program running in the background based on all your past negativity. But because of that, it can kind of accidentally set you up for more negativity, for more suffering.
So it's not that it wants us to be unhappy. It's more like it doesn't know any better.
Exactly. It's just wired to keep us in those familiar negative loops.
Even if it hurts us.
Unfortunately, yes. Imagine, for example, you finally decide to leave a bad relationship.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You've done the work, you've set boundaries, you're ready for something healthy, but then out of nowhere, these doubts creep in. You start questioning your worth.
Oh, I've so been there.
Right. You start thinking, am I even capable of love? Am I going to mess this up?
It's like self-sabotage, almost.
That's a good way to put it. And it's the old frequency at work. It doesn't want you to change. It's threatened by this positive shift, so it tries to pull you back into the familiar.
Wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like, it's not that we're attracting bad partners, it's that this pattern we have is threatened by a good thing.
Exactly. And it can happen in any area of your life, career, relationships, finances, wherever you're trying to make a positive change.
This is really eye-opening stuff. It's like we're shining a light on something that's been operating in the shadows for way too long.
And that's the power of awareness, right?
Yeah, I guess so. So we've got the attention-seeking, we've got this kind of weird sadistic streak. What else does this old frequency have up its sleeve?
Well, another big one is its reactivity. It thrives on those knee-jerk reactions we all have.
Oh, you mean like when we just react without thinking?
Precisely. It's like you're driving in traffic, someone cuts you off, and boom, you instantly feel that anger.
Ugh, don't even get me started on road rage.
But think about it. In that moment, you've let your old frequency take control.
It's hijacked me, basically.
Exactly. You're totally hijacked by those old patterns of anger and frustration.
So it's not just that I have a short fuse, it's that this old frequency is using those situations to make it worse, to make me more reactive over time.
You got it. You're giving it exactly what it wants, that burst of negative energy.
Man, this is kind of depressing, but also empowering in a way. Like, if I can start to see these patterns, maybe I can actually do something about them.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step.
Okay, so how do we break out of that cycle of reactivity? Because I'm starting to see it everywhere in my life.
That's a great question. We'll talk more about that in just a bit.
Okay, so that was a lot to take in, but it makes you think, like, we've been playing by the rules of this old frequency for who knows how long.
Yeah, without even realizing it.
Exactly. But now that we're starting to see it, how do we actually change it? Like, these patterns are so ingrained.
That's the big question, right? And the good news is just like our past experiences shaped this old frequency, we can create a new one.
Okay, so we're not stuck with it forever.
Not at all. Think of it like learning a new song on an instrument. It takes time, but eventually the new melody becomes more natural.
So instead of fighting that old tune, we can learn a new one that's more like who we want to be.
Exactly. And it starts with awareness. It's like we've been driving on autopilot, reacting without thinking, but once we see those automatic reactions, we can choose a different route.
Okay, awareness, got it. But how do we actually become more aware these patterns feel like they're just part of me,
Think of it like building a muscle. At first, it takes effort, but with practice, it becomes easier.
Okay, so what kind of practice are we talking about?
Things like meditation, for example. Mindfulness practices can really help strengthen that awareness muscle.
So it's about learning to just observe our thoughts and feelings without judging them.
You got it. It's like creating space between you and your thoughts, so you don't just automatically react to everything, every little impulse, every negative thought.
I've tried meditation before, but I could never really stick with it. My mind is just way too busy,
Oh yeah, that's super common. Don't worry, it's a practice. It's not about clearing your mind completely.
Oh, okay, good.
It's about noticing when your mind wanders and bringing it back to the present moment.
So it's more about training our attention.
Exactly. Like a puppy learning to focus.
I can picture that. Okay, so mindfulness is one tool. Anything else that can help shift these old patterns?
Visualization is another powerful one.
Visualization.
Yeah, it's using your imagination to create a picture of you living the life you want.
So like daydreaming, but with a purpose.
Kind of, but it's more than just wishing. When you visualize, you're not just seeing it, you're feeling it, you're embodying that future self.
I've heard about visualization, but it always seemed a little out there for me. Does it really work?
Think of it like this. Our brains are wired to respond to images and emotions, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So when you visualize something, you're basically programming your subconscious mind. You're telling it, this is possible.
So it's like planting a seed in our minds.
I love that. Yeah, and the more we visualize it, the more we align our energy with it.
And then it becomes more likely to happen in real life.
Exactly. Okay, so we have mindfulness to create awareness and visualization to really imprint that new vision. What else can we do to solidify this new frequency?
Yeah, good question.
Well, positive affirmations are another great tool.
Affirmations, okay.
Yeah, it's about choosing thoughts and beliefs that support the reality you want.
So instead of all that negative self-talk, we're replacing it with positive messages.
Exactly. Remember, what you focus on expands. So if you want to create a new reality, you have to start feeding it new thoughts.
And that ties back to the idea that old frequency thrives on negativity, right?
You got it. By focusing on positive affirmations, you're starving that old pattern and feeding the new one.
This is starting to feel really powerful. Like we actually have the power to change our lives just by changing our thoughts.
That's the truth. We're not victims of our past or our circumstances. We can choose, we can evolve, we can create.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm starting to feel a shift in my energy, like a sense of possibility.
That's fantastic. And remember, this is just the beginning. The more you explore these concepts, the more you'll unlock your potential.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep going. Before we wrap up this segment, what's one thing that really stands out to you about this whole idea of the old frequency?
It really highlights how personal transformation works. It's not just about willpower or positive thinking. It's about seeing the patterns that are driving us and making a conscious choice to shift them.
I totally agree. It's like having a new lens to see things through. Instead of feeling like a victim, we can see challenges as opportunities.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for our own energy and using it to create the life we want. And it's not passive. It takes awareness, effort, and practice.
It's like we're training our minds to work on a higher level.
That's a great way to put it. And like with any skill, the more we practice, the better we get.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring this idea of the old frequency and how it might be holding us back. We talked about its tactics, how it grabs our attention, how it thrives on negativity, and even how it uses fear against us. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you'd like our listeners to really take away from this?
For me, it's that we don't have to be victims of this old frequency. We have more power than we realize.
Yeah, once we understand those patterns, we can step out of that reactive cycle.
Exactly. It's like instead of just reacting all the time, we can become conscious creators. We can start shaping our reality.
So it's not about blaming the past, but about recognizing those patterns and then, I guess, choosing a different way.
Exactly. We always have a choice. We can feed that old frequency with negativity, or we can choose something different. We can choose to create a new frequency, one that's much more empowering.
And we talked about some great ways to do that, right? Like mindfulness, visualization, positive affirmations. It's like we have a whole toolkit now.
Totally. It's about paying attention to our thoughts, our emotions, and making sure they're aligned with the life we want to live.
One thing that really stuck with me was that idea about fear being a projection from that old frequency.
Yeah, it can feel so real, right?
It does, but it's not always based in reality. It's just that echo from the past.
Right, and once we see that, we can start to detach from it. We can reclaim our power to choose. We can ask ourselves, is this fear real, or is it just a leftover from the past?
That's such a good question to ask. It helps us to know what kind of fear we're dealing with, Is it keeping me safe or is it holding me back?
Exactly, and so often the fear that holds us back, it's based on those old patterns, those old limiting beliefs that we just don't need anymore.
Right. It makes you say, how much of our anxiety and doubt is actually coming from this old frequency?
Yeah, it's worth considering, isn't it?
It is. So as we finish up, is there one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. If our past experiences created this old frequency, then our present actions can create a new one. It's an ongoing process, this journey of self-discovery and transformation, but it's so worth it.
Beautifully said. And remember, everyone listening, you have the power to choose. Each and every day, you can create a new reality for yourself. You can step into a more empowered version of you. And that's what personal transformation is all about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.